Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. This is the Next Reel, everybody. I'm Pete Wright, and that there is Andy Nelson.
Hey, hey, hey.
And we spoil movies. Tonight on the show, it's another Ocean's 11 movie. This time, less Rat Pack, but a whole lot more fun with Clooney and crew in Soderbergh's 2001 remake.
Please state your name for the record.
Daniel Ocean.
You have been implicated in over a dozen other confidence schemes and frauds. What do you think you would do if released?
I don't know. How much do you guys make a year?
It's never been done before. You want to knock over a casino? 3 casinos? You gotta be nuts.
Exactly. This place houses a security system that rivals most nuclear missile silos.
Smash and grab job, huh? Slightly more complicated than that.
Oh, yeah.
You'd need at least a dozen guys doing a combination of cons.
10 ought to do it, don't you think? You think we need one more? You think we need one more? All right, we'll get one more.
Andy, so here's the thing about this movie. I am super defensive about it. I don't get why I am. I need to let that go. I have kind of an emotional thing with this movie. I feel like every time I talk to somebody about this movie, they have things that they don't like about it, and that hurts my feelings. Why is that?
Would think it's probably a breeze of a film to watch. It's light, it's entertaining, and if somebody doesn't like part of what you find so breezy and entertaining, then it taints that, and it takes away the element that says this is breezy, entertaining fun, and it turns it into something that is dark and foreboding.
That's exactly what I would have written in my review. If it weren't for all the taint that has made this dark and foreboding, this would be a great movie. I adore this movie. I really do. I have a great time with it. I think everything works. I think the 11 are well selected. It's a cast that works really well together. It is one of those casts that excites me because I read about all of the weird sort of casting changes that happened at the last minute, and I still think they ended up with just the right people in the right parts. Even Basher and his accent I find charming, though terrible. And so I have a great time with this movie. I think I want to start because I think the parallel for me with this movie, and indeed heist films in general, there is a parallel that we ran into with time travel movies. That the better the time travel movie, the better the heist movie, the easier it is to keep up with what's going on and to make sense of the gambit at the end of the movie. How well does this movie hold up in that regard for you?
I think that is a very clever element of this film. I enjoy how they pull the heist. I think it is quite a fun way to do it. I don't know if I completely believe it, but I think the film does a great job of setting it up where you don't necessarily have to believe that it's exactly, doable. I think they do a great job of making it feel doable. And what I really appreciate in this film is it feels like all 11 members of the team, granted, maybe the Malloy twins, you really only need one of them, maybe not two. But really, I mean, they all are doing something. And that I find so much more important when you're telling a story with a cast as large as this, that they could not figure out how to make work as effectively in the original film.
Even the characters that feel a little bit shoehorned in here. We have this the Julia Roberts character who was was only on set shooting for 2 weeks and was really I think the case has been made that she was sort of sidelined as the female character. I think for me her role is still relevant and important, and I think the charisma between the two of them makes her part more relevant in this movie and more useful.
I think her part in this film is the only reason that I find myself more drawn to it than I have in previous iterations.
I want to hear more about that.
Well, I think what I found watching this film, the thing that really frustrated me when I first watched it is it felt like it wasn't really a fully fleshed out story. It's like, okay, here's some guys who want to do this heist to steal all this money from these casinos. They set a plan in motion and they do it. And that was it. I'm like, okay, it really didn't give me any twists, there's really nothing there. I never felt, any sense of change from anybody. I never really felt much of anything. It's just like the story goes into motion, they do it, and it's over. Okay. And I still feel that way largely with the bulk of the story. But what I really found this time in watching it is that the film really relies on that element of the relationship change with Tess and her love for Danny. That unfortunately I don't think it's not as developed as I think it needs to be to really make it as important as it should have been. But I think that really is the whole crux of this story, that Danny is really doing this whole thing. I mean, sure, they're getting incredibly rich because of this whole heist, but at the same time, his ulterior motive is that he's doing this to win Tess back. And the beautiful, beautiful scenes that we have at the end of the film when
they have her watch the feed, and she sees Danny and Terry talking, and Danny saying, if I help you, will you give up Tess? And he says yes, anything to get my money back, or whatever he says. And that was a great turn to see. But then the moment after that, when we see Tess kind of have that realization that she wants to be with Danny, she's really the one who is making the change in this story. And because of that, I really found myself drawn to her so much more on this watching. And I found that this was the core of the story and the reason that I ended up really connecting it to it this time.
That's right. And it sort of starts with a scene, when Rusty, Brad Pitt's character, actually calls him out on it, right? When he discovers that it's Tess who's in this casino, that Tess is who Matt Damon has been, hunting or stalking for the last couple of days, that it's Tess, and he knows the backstory already and calls Danny out on it in the warehouse. That is an interesting turn because it paints Danny as the lovesick idiot who's doing this thing for the wrong reasons, who's distracted. But it turns out over the course of the gambit, over the course of the heist, that Danny was right, that Danny believed in this relationship that he had. He believed in the love that she still had for him, believed that Terry was, the bad guy, and was able to turn everybody. And I think it's just very clever the way they actually, wrote those pieces into place to make it at least somewhat believable at the end when she turns and runs to him. As he's being let off in the police car. I think it works. If anything, the actual turn when she runs down the sidewalk in front of the Bellagio is the only sequence that is a touch heavy-handed for me. But it still works. It's still believable, and I'm still I'm heartsick for them. Come on.
And it's funny because for me, that is like the emotional core of the film, and I don't think the film would be worth its salt without that scene. I think that really for me became the core moment of the whole film, and I was so much more connected to the film because of that scene.
Well, I'm just a little bit. I'm not saying I disagree. It's a little bit. Okay, so let's talk about some of the major elements of the heist film, and especially comparing it to some of our criticisms of last week's movie, because I think that's kind of important, because the things that I wanted to love in last week's movie, I think they get right in this movie. And the first one is building the team. How do you feel about how they pulled the team together?
Well, this is actually building a team, and I appreciate that so much. The last film, like we discussed last week, it's like they already had a team together, and they're just kind of getting everybody together, and it lasted for half the film, and it was really tedious. This film really feels like they have that great conversation early on where they're like, we need an Ella Fitzgerald and in a whatever Boski or whatever the random list of right. things that they need. Miss Daisy, and then they go and they kind of recruit this team, and I like the way that it feels, where they're actually finding the right people to be a part of this, and it actually works. I'm engaged, I'm interested, and I felt like this is how you build a team.
I love the sequence when he's making those comments too. The Boski and the Jim Brown and a Miss Daisy and two Jethros and a Leon Spinks. It turns out that there's background to those.
Yeah.
And I'd never given it much thought, but the Boski is a reference to Ivan Boski, the Wall Street big time Wall Street trader who got put away for securities fraud. It's about a bankroller who has some sort of insider information. And there's the Jim Brown, which is the confrontation between Catton and Linus, which was staged for Terry Benedict so that Linus could do the pickpocket thing. And that was named after the football player. I'm not much of a football aficionado, but I imagine that's because he was, I don't know, fleet-footed of some sort. I guess he was maybe good with his hands. I'm guessing on that one. Anyway, they go through the whole thing, and I think it's a savvy, not only screenwriting, but intent and actually executing these things so that you can piece them back together. I think it works very well. The building the team part works well because of the pacing largely. I mean, that was a thing that was such a drag in the last movie. It was an hour before we get into what is this thing all about. Here, we have a bit of a protracted opening with the the actors who are learning to play poker. That's a fun sequence. But I mean, at 12 minutes, we're looking at the first blueprints, right? We are ready to go. We're making the pitch to Ruben at his breakfast, minutes after that. We have got Bernie Mac first, Brad Pitt, Elliot Gould. At 18 minutes, they begin just blasting through the rest of the team, and we have this team built, and it's smart and funny and quick, and I'm interested in every one of their little stories. And then we get on to the meat of the heist, and I think that is a thing where this movie really excels.
That is really the place where it excels, and it's the way that they develop it, where you don't even realize that you're kind of into the heist. It's kind of fun. You have these elements like, oh, we've got to build this model of the vault just so we can practice and things like that, which seems so absurd when you think about it. And then in the end, you go, "Oh, okay, I get why they're doing that."
Yeah,
but it's fun. Yeah. They set it up in a way where it all makes sense, and you don't really think about it. And I think that's smart storytelling. I do struggle a little bit with some of the early conversation scenes primarily between Clooney and Pitt. As much as I love these two actors, I feel so often when they are having their conversations that it's two actors having conversations. It just feels like, they're having a fun time making this movie, and it doesn't feel completely like they're actually the characters in the film. That happens quite a bit in the first bit. And I don't know if that's them so much as maybe it's just how the script ended up getting written. It might feel too written by Ted Griffin. But I don't know. As I watched the film this time, I asked myself, how much does that really matter? Is it that important, or is this film designed to just be fun and give us a good time and just make it something where we can just kind of let go and not have to worry about all that sort of stuff? I still have a feeling that I will have a hard time letting go of those elements that I do feel kind of false and stagey. But at the same time,
about, just so I know, are you talking about like their
like Clooney and Pitt,
you bet big and you take the house? That was good.
No,
right? That was good.
It's
right?
more
those
like
kind of scenes?
It's more like when they're talking about how many is it, 10, is it 11? That scene.
That's one of my favorite sequences. I knew you were going to bring that out. It's one of my very favorite sequences in the film. That little scene, it's perfectly shot. It's perfect angle. Pitt doesn't say anything. I love it.
No, I love all of that, but it just feels written. And I think that's what happens often in the early scenes here, particularly with the two of them, where it just feels written and their dialogue feels written and the way that it plays out just feels staged and written. And like everything with, as much as I enjoy Pitt and the actors like Topher Grace and Shane, what's his name, and all those guys, it's very fun, but I always feel like, until we start really getting the rest of the gang, I just feel like everything is just coming out of a screenwriter's hand, as they say.
But what's so funny about that is reportedly largely improvised, particularly that sequence, that it wasn't written at all.
Well, then it's on them.
I think there are some great moments in there when Topher Grace stands up and says, "All Reds." I think I about lose it. I think it's very, very good. And I love these little bits, when Brad Pitt is sitting at the bar and he's just exhausted. He's trying to have a conversation with a bartender. Nobody can hear each other. And then you see just Clooney's chest pass behind him. I mean, it took me probably 4 or 5 viewings to notice, oh, that's where Clooney went into the back room. That's very clever. I love how they did that. Yeah. And so the little pieces of that, I think the architecture of it, I think worked very, very well. I had a great time. And again, back to pacing, they explained the caper straight up at 30 minutes after some nice, entertaining little bits. And I should say, ending on Matt Damon. I think his was the last one, the pickpocket. And Matt Damon is wearing my favorite hat in cinema. And I had never noticed it. And it was actually because I use this joke around my house all the time when I'm helping my kids with their homework. And so it was my daughter who noticed it this time around and actually pointed it out to me that Matt Damon is wearing a red hat with a triangle patch on it that has the hat in it. And on that hat is a patch with that same hat on it. It is a hat on a hat on a hat, which delights me. It tickles me all up and down in just the right way.
Do you wish you could buy that hat?
I do. I really wish I could buy that hat. I would wear that hat every day. I would want that hat to be the mascot for our show. Are you kidding? The next reel, a hat on a hat on a hat.
It is pretty clever. It's
so clever, and it's so clever for this movie, which is doing so much to just be aware of itself. You know, we know what we're getting into when we step on this particular property. I think it's great. You know, there's some, speaking of just the way this thing is shot, and I think there is a lot to learn from Soderbergh's camera and editing and placement. There is a sequence in here that feels like something that would annoy me, but otherwise I think is fantastic. And I think it's something, I don't know, it feels like you should have picked it out as something that would really bug me. Because normally it would, but for some reason they get away with it in this movie. This is the sequence when they're talking about the what's his name, the electrician, and they're talking about bringing him into the fold. And they have a long shot across the park of this guy. They're talking about him in one location, and then they cut to a long shot across the park as he's like tripping over the dog and everything. They pull back the camera, and suddenly they're still talking about him, but they're eating breakfast on a balcony now looking at him. It's as if that conversation just went straight through. And I have complained about that in the past. For some reason, that works for me very, very well right here.
I think so much of that falls to the nature of the fun story, right? This is a very lighthearted, easygoing caper. It's nothing that is offensive. It's nothing that is dark. You know, they're robbing 3 casinos, but nobody's ever really shooting guns. It's all done in light fun. And I think because of that storytelling style ends up working. When you do it in a film like No, which is about, Chilean political revolts, it doesn't make as much sense. Right.
Right. Maybe that's the difference. Not enough Chilean politics in this movie. It's actually an interesting point you make about the violence. There is only one, I think there's one sequence of intentional murderous violence in this movie. That's at the very beginning. It's the third robbery in the flashback where they, the camera's back from, or sort of pulling back at a distance, and you see them shooting the.
It's the three famous attempts for stealing money from the casinos, right? And the third one,
it's only the third one he gets shot.
It's Berlin playing.
That's right.
Take My Breath Away in slow-mo as the
Don Johnson apparently is robbing the bank.
So good.
Yeah, good times.
But even that, because it's the way that it's shot in slow-mo, you have Berlin singing Take My Breath Away. Even though we have, the security guards gunning down a thief, it's still done in a very fun, lighthearted way that really you're laughing at. And it's sad to hear, but really you are. And I think to that end, that's, things like that. I'm curious to know how this film is going to hold up, in 50 years, when, we're as far away from it or thereabouts as we are from the original Ocean's 11. Like, is it still going to hold up? Is the humor going to hold up? Is the way that Soderbergh put the film together and kind of the storytelling style, will it all make sense still? Or is it going to have a dated feel, much like the original Ocean's 11? I don't know if it will. I feel like this is going to hold up longer over time than the original, because the original was relying solely on the names and their presence in the film, that it didn't bother with making a good story at all. This one, I feel like they do a much better job of actually putting a cohesive heist together with really interesting characters. And so I feel like even if some of the stuff might be a little dated, I don't feel it's going to be as dated as that version is.
I have to look at my teenager, right? I mean, I have to look and say, like, even though you have no pop culture connection to most of these people, right? Is this still a good movie? Is this still a movie that you'd sit down and watch, when you have other things you could also be doing? And the answer has always been yes, that this movie is super entertaining. This movie is one they want to watch and watch over and over again, because it's a fun, funny, entertaining, breezy story well-paced story, and it doesn't rely on the just star power. I think for me, the star power adds something to it because I do know who those guys are, and I think it's funny to see them doing certain things, and it's also fun for me to try and explain them. Here's why this is funny for these people to be in this movie, but you don't need it. You don't need it. I think the movie stands alone.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about getting it made. I guess this was, they had a lot of people on the list to jump on to this film.
I think pretty early on, they wanted to do this with kind of an ensemble cast of movie stars. Because of that, it became rather complex, because once you start getting movie stars on board to be one of the 11, I guess you could say 12 once you throw Julia Roberts into the mix, 13 really, because we're also talking about Terry Benedict. You want to get as many stars in those roles as possible. All of a sudden, it turns into a challenge, because these are not people who are dropping other projects for this one. These are people who drop this project for other projects, right?
Right.
And that became
Ocean's Infinity War.
Right. And that became a real challenge, because so many of these people had other things lined up. Mike Myers was on board at one point. Just the list of people who were on at some point and then had to drop out due to scheduling conflicts. Mike Myers, Bruce Willis, who apparently was going to be Danny in the original casting before
I can see
he
that.
had to pull out. I think that's a great choice. And I love that he ends up coming back in the next one. Ewan McGregor was originally going to be Basher. Alan Arkin was on board. I am assuming in Carl Reiner's part.
Yeah.
Ralph Fiennes was on board as I think Benedict. Luke and Owen Wilson were on as the twins, but they had to pull out due to commitments for Royal Tenenbaums. And then the next choices, which is so strange to me, were Joel and Ethan Coen.
Oh man, I had not heard that.
I can't even picture the writer-directors as like actors in this film. I love the idea. I think it's really clever. But anyway, they didn't it didn't work out for them either, which was fine. Mark Wahlberg, he was actually cast as Linus, but he ended up dropping it to jump onto Planet of the Apes, which I'm guessing is a franchise he thought was going to just take off. Oh dear. Danny Glover was on board to play Frank, but ended up dropping for Tenenbaums. Sidney Pollack, Dennis France, Warren Beatty, Michael Douglas, Don Rickles. And then I guess Johnny Depp was also considered as Linus. So crazy that they ended up with this cast, and that it ended up being such a perfectly cohesive cast that all felt like they were meant to be in the roles that they have.
We should probably transition over to the deep scene dive, don't you think?
Yeah, let's do it.
I think there are arguably better sequences we could have picked for the deep scene dive, but this one I think is important because it's a corollary scene to the one we picked in the last film. And I wanted to talk just a little bit about your thoughts for how they handled this moment, the emotion and the framing of this moment in this film compared to last film. Last film we talked about the end of the film this was in the church. They're doing the final sequence, the goodbye team sequence as they're and then they exit and walk down the streets of Las Vegas. Here, the robbery's done and the team, barring Danny, he's been taken away. They've escaped in the SWAT trucks. And Tess had heard what Terry said about dumping her to get the money back, and Danny's arrested, and now we're watching sort of the team as they dissolve.
Yeah, it's kind of an intercut between Tess breaking up with Terry to chase after Danny, and then the team kind of dumping the SWAT trucks and watching the fountains of the Bellagio, right?
Yeah, right.
It's funny that you say there are probably better scenes. For me, this is the core moment that actually made this film work for me. So it's funny that you say it that way. Yes, there are probably more fun scenes, and
that's what I mean. That's
that
a
are
better
done
way to put it.
Really well. But man, this scene, this bit with Tess and Terry. One, I just love the way the breakup is done. What a great callback that is. I think that works really nicely.
This
but
is
then,
you're talking about when she says there are eyes.
you of all
always
people should
someone
know
watching.
in your hotel. Yeah, there's always somebody watching.
Yeah.
Great moment. But really, for me, it is that moment when we have, well, two parts of this. The part with Tess, focusing on that storyline, where we see her as she's walking out of the casino, walking through the floor, and it's an incredible shot. And it's just a beautiful long tracking shot as we're walking back with her, and we're just looking at her. And this is great acting, right? Where you're looking at a person and you're getting all of everything that they're thinking about on their face as she's kind of going through this process of everything that just happened regarding Terry, and then kind of that pause and that transition as she realizes everything about Danny, and that she really loves Danny and wants to be with him. And then kind of that fantastic run out of the casino, which for me, it's not as high up there as like Billy Crystal running to get to Meg Ryan in When Harry Met Sally, but it's a great moment. We have her kind of changing her motivation right there, and her pursuit to go find him. I love that. That to me is like the emotional core of the film, and I really connected with that. But then I also really connected with the other 10, minus Clooney, all standing off watching the fountains of the Bellagio in just a beautiful moment as we're listening to Claire de Lune, and we're just seeing them stare at it and then slowly peel away one at a time. It's a beautiful way to kind of just wrap this up. And yes, I love the kind of that connection of the first film where you have everybody kind of depressed as all their money burned up, and they just kind of are walking past the camera one at a time. Just like that, I feel like it's almost a nod as one peels away one at a time and leaves the fountain. But I just felt so much stronger connection to this one because I really cared about these guys.
I'm right with you on that. 2 points. First, we have I was commenting last week about how much I liked the way the camera was backing up as at that low angle as the crew sort of walked parallel and by. And you get the homage to that angle. I don't know if it was intentional here, but in this sequence, we get the music start to play, and the camera backs up as the crew emerges out of the warehouse into the light, where it's the first time you actually get a clear perspective of where they are in relationship to the Bellagio, like how close their garage is, how close the replica that they've been working on this whole time really is just sort of right across the street from the Bellagio. But we have the camera at that low angle moving backwards. I think Matt Damon's in front, and they're just sort of walking slowly as the music picks up, and they end up taking their place across the street at the Bellagio. I find it very touching and a moving sequence. And the way they shot this scene, the Soderbergh direction was, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think this was the very last thing they shot intentionally, that this was the very last scene of the movie and the last scene that they shot. And
it was the last scene they shot in Vegas before they went to LA to finish all the interiors.
Okay. So you already have that sort of emotional connection to the place, that you're about to say goodbye to the place, which has been a very important kind of thing. And then Soderbergh says, I want you to just hang out and watch it and leave when you feel like it's right. There's nothing sort of scripted here. I just want you to take it all in and see how it feels. And I get that, I get that out of the sequence. And for me, it's very powerful as they start peeling off, looking at each other. I am moved.
Soderbergh is a director who I don't always like his films, but I love that he's always experimenting. He's doing indie films where he's just playing around and trying new things. He's doing big budget things, and he's still playing around and trying new things. And I think that is to be respected. I love that, in this film, he was really pushing to not have to rely on coming back to the same angles. He would try to, when he would have these conversations, I can't remember what era he was referencing, but he was looking at older films, and he liked how when they would cut scenes together, notably like their action sequences. I think he was speaking to this on the commentary specifically about The Heist, where they would not necessarily be cutting back to the same angle. Every time they would cut, it would be a new angle, a new shot. And he felt that it gave it a lot of life. And so he was really pushing to do that. In this bit of the film, there is more kind of the back and forth cutting, which is fine. It works in context of what he's doing here. You know, the heist is over. We're at a period of kind of more relaxation, and it kind of falls to kind of more standard practices. But I love that he still is trying new things. And my favorite cinematic moment here in this section that we're talking about is when you have Andy Garcia as Terry. Just, you can tell that he is just fuming inside, but he plays cool so brilliantly. Andy Garcia, man, I mean, this is the sort of movie where you just fall for the guy because he's just so powerful on screen. Yeah. But it's when after Tess leaves him and he kind of walks back to his elevator and he goes in, and you got a close up of his face as he's looking right at you, and the doors close and it's complete black. And then all of a sudden you're tilting up to the 11's truck, their SWAT truck pulling into this garage of theirs, and just the way that transition happens is so smooth and just makes it a breeze. And he's talked about how transitions are such key elements of films, and I've heard Kubrick talk about this and all this. It's a key element that filmmakers realize as they're telling their story. It is one of the most important things, getting from one scene to the next. And man, if Soderbergh doesn't do it just brilliantly throughout this film.
We talked about George Clooney as Danny Ocean. He had to drop out of some other stuff to land in this one.
Well, yeah, he was the first one to commit to this one. And I am guessing it's because he was on at a larger level with this project. But yeah, he was going to be in the film Unfaithful as the lead there, and ended up having to drop out of that one. So all these other people were dropping out of this film. He is the one who dropped out of another film so that he could stay on this one.
I'm not sure what 4 9s does, but that ace, I think, is pretty high. I love Danny Ocean. Brad Pitt, we talked about as Rusty. Matt Damon as Linus. Don Cheadle's the one that has some controversy.
Yeah, his accent was terrible. I think that everybody said it was one of the worst accents in film. He said, this is kind of funny. He said, "My British friends tell me it's a truly terrible London accent in Ocean's." I guess specifically this was Ocean's 13 in this conversation. "You know something? I really worked on that accent. Went to London, spoke to people, got to know it. My agent said it was fine, so I'm stuck with this thing, even though everyone laughs at me. So I sacked her, of course."
He and Dick Van Dyke, man. Own those accents.
Well, and it's funny because apparently he was trying to do a better accent in 12 and 13, but they said you can't. You have to do it like you did last time to keep the character going. I love that.
Oh, that's too funny.
Before you go on, I just have to point out, I found it so odd, and I don't know why they chose this, but Danny Ocean is the only character who's named from the character in the original film. The rest of these 10 that we're talking about, their names in no way connect to the previous film. So I just thought that was a strange thing that's worth pointing out.
That is very strange.
I think that Norman Fell would have been Basher, though.
No, you're lampooning Norman Fell, but you know he would be an incredible Cockney.
I'm sure he would.
He would lock that Cockney accent. Oh, Norman. Bernie Mac is Frank Catton. I actually really liked Bernie Mac in this. I'm so glad Danny Glover didn't stick around for this one.
Yeah, Bernie Mac, I think may have been one of my favorites. And I find that in so many films when Bernie Mac is involved, I just enjoy watching him so much. He's a brilliant screen presence. And so I'm glad to see him here.
Now, you said the Malloy twins were too much for you, that you could have taken either Scott Conn or Casey Affleck. Why is that? Make your case.
I didn't mean it like that. I actually love the Malloy twins. I think they're hilarious. What I meant was, do they really need both of them? Like, were they doing anything separately that one couldn't have done by themselves? That's what I meant. In context of The Job, I don't think they ever did anything by themselves. Did they? I guess right. Maybe Virgil's driving the Phantom van,
but still, I mean, you're right. But so what? Because the Malloy twins are one identity.
Well, what I'm saying though is when you have Rusty and Danny talking in the bar, trying to figure out who they need for their team and what sort of team size they need. Like they're not thinking of names yet, and they
Yeah.
come to 11, but that makes no sense if the Malloy twins work as one.
No, I see your point. I see your point. I do. I see your point. I don't like it, but I see it.
I just want to see them doing something different instead of always doing the same thing together.
Well, they had a thing, Andy. They had a
did,
gimmick.
and it's very funny. I love that thing. My favorite use of that thing is when they're pushing the cart and they go, "Oh, I forgot my card," and they like have their little tiff right there. The other guards, they're like, "God, calm down. It's fine. Just remember your card next time." That was the moment that I really appreciated that moment. To that end, I guess they needed each other to create those sort of constant diversions. But
yes,
but
they
still,
did.
I
That was
still
a great bit.
going back, I can't imagine that was in Rusty and Danny's mind as they were putting the concept of who they needed together.
Well, they certainly had talked about two Jethros, and that's who they were talking about.
Maybe, I guess
They must have had him in mind.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I think you're wrong, and I think what just happened is I poked a hole, and that hole is going to open up, and eventually it will be a flood of understanding and awareness, and you'll come to agree with me that they're brilliant, and in fact, you need them both. I'm gonna let that simmer. I'm gonna sit on that.
What I do like about the Malloy twins is their names are Turk and Virgil, which is a callback to The Godfather, because as you may recall, Scott Caan's father, who is James Caan and played Santino, or Sonny Corleone, he was actually his attempted assassination was by Virgil the Turk Sollozzo.
Carl Reiner is Saul Bloom, and Elliot Gould is Reuben. Elliot Gould kind of plays the money man, who was the apoplectic Russian gangster in the original, or the Greek gangster in the original movie. Yeah. I vastly prefer Elliot Gould here.
Oh, I do too. I think Amir Tamaroff, whatever, I think did an admirable job. But I think Elliot Gould plays that just so much better. And it's not as over the top and annoying as it was in the previous film. And you mentioned Carl Reiner, you just kind of passed over him, but I think Carl Reiner and Saul Bloom has to be probably my favorite character in this film, because Carl Reiner, there's something about his presence on screen that just melts me. Like he's just like, it's like watching a grandpa on screen, and you're just like, oh, I just want to be watching you the whole time because you're so enjoyable to watch. And the fact that he's the last one at the fountain right here in our scene dive, as he kind of looks at it and just does that look, he gives it a look that I'm like, oh, that is like a big moment. And the fact that he's the last one there and gives it that moment, I really appreciated that, and it just made me want to see more Carl Reiner.
I absolutely agree with you. I think he's fantastic, and it's interesting. He's a good heart in this movie. He's a good heart of this movie, and still they give him the heart disease, literal heart problems that turn out to be part of the gag.
Yeah,
or are they? I don't know. He's definitely got indigestion. We know that.
He sure can make himself sweat then, right?
Yes.
Because boy, is he covered in sweat when he's faking it.
Right.
This is an issue I have with the kind of the structure of the heist, is all of that sort of stuff where it's very much The Sting, where all of these people are playing parts. I struggle a bit because I feel like it's such a stretch for some of it to happen perfectly the way that it does. But again, it goes back to the lightness that the film plays with, and I end up feeling like I don't care so much. I find myself not worrying about it so much. Like so many of our listeners who complained to us about our problems with the time travel elements of About Time.
Yeah. Yeah, we were
it's a light movie. You're not supposed to worry.
Yeah, you're not supposed to think about it. I think it's interesting that, in fact, no Hays Code here. They don't kill the guy with the heart attack in the beginning of the movie, or in the end of the movie, and the thieves get away with all the cash. And I find that fantastic. I love it. It needed to work out that way.
But what I love about it is that, and just again, speaking to our deep scene dive here, George Clooney and Julia Roberts have that moment by the police car when he looks at her and says, "I told you, I always knew what I was doing." And even though he's going to jail again, and that was all part of his plan. And that to me says everything about this film and what it is about the nature of this love story, and that this whole thing kind of came together because of his love for Tess and the fact that he didn't want to lose her. And the way that it all unfolded, I find really beautiful, especially at that moment when she's saying goodbye to him. Man, did that just hit me this time.
We've talked about my love for Soderbergh's camera and editing, and in fact, as Peter Andrews, he served as cinematographer on this film. Again, we've talked about this before. I think he did the same thing in Side Effects. We talked about that on the film board, and I feel like when I saw this movie, I was at a place where I was just starting to take on my own camera jobs outside of television, and I learned and applied a lot immediately. I did. My first job was a bit for the Oregon Humane Society, and I mean, it was practically Ocean's Oregon Humane Society. It was split screening and crazy Dutch angles, and I had a blast applying Soderbergh's camera techniques to my own stuff. It's really fun.
Yeah, I mean, he, again, like going back to what I said earlier, he's a consummate filmmaker who's always trying stuff, and he never is just reliant on things that have gotten him by in the past. He's always pushing himself, and for that, I will always respect the man.
Now, editing, sometimes he serves as his own editor. Did he do that on this movie?
No, Stephen Mirioni did the editing.
Okay,
here.
all right.
Does he really?
Yeah, well, we talked about in Side Effects, he was Marianne Mirioni, which was also Soderbergh.
Yeah, Marianne Bernard.
Or Bernard, that's right. For me, I think his touch, and clearly working with an editor, he has a nice touch, and I think all that goes to pacing, which was such a relief in this film.
Well, and I think that helps largely is that David Holmes' music throughout is just an incredible choice for this, because it has that kind of 70s jazzy vibe that makes it incredibly fun to listen to, and just whether it's, honestly, the soundtrack to this is just killer. So many great tracks. The Elvis tune, Little Less Conversation, became a huge hit after this. But David Holmes' music, I think, really just ties everything together beautifully.
I think so too, and man, from the very first cue, he walks in, and there you have that first, the very first shot is that wonderful Soderbergh sort of symmetry with that chair in the middle of this giant widescreen, and Danny comes out and he sits in it, and you don't see the parole board, but we're in a parole hearing, and that question, what do you think you would do if released? And it just holds on Danny, and then boom, that first note from that first cue is. It's just perfect. It drives you right into the movie, and I feel like you know exactly what you're going to get thanks to the music in that first scene. It's just great.
Yeah, it does have a very 70s-ish kind of jazzy vibe, which works really nicely, and it plays into what Soderbergh was doing anyway, because he was throwing a lot of 70s zooms, like those crash zooms in, and just he was doing 30s and 40s sort of styles. He was all over the place with different techniques that he was throwing in here, and I love that everybody else was kind of in on it with him, so they did a great job.
We got some fun cameos.
Yeah, I just thought it was really nice during the big fight night scene at the boxing arena. There's a quick shot. Unfortunately, it's just one shot, but you do see Henry Silva and Angie Dickinson having their little cameo in that, both from the original Ocean's 11 film, and it was Henry Silva's last film before he retired. So it was nice. It was a nice nod that Soderbergh did.
They also dropped Weintraub in there as another cameo.
Yeah, which I found this so interesting that so Jerry Weintraub, who's the producer, he's in the high roller room playing baccarat with Lyman Zerga, which is great, and he's the one who says to Zerga, he says, "Don't get into Terry Benedict for too much money," and I guess he's credited as the high roller. He'll appear in Ocean's 12 as the American businessman who has a key role, and in Ocean's 13 as Denny Shields. And apparently he's kind of interwoven in all three films. And what's interesting is that he also played a high roller named Jilly from Philly in Vegas Vacation, which is a movie that he also produced before these ones. And appearing next to him is an uncredited man in his crew with dark hair, glasses, and a dark beard. And I guess that this same guy is next to him in Ocean's 11. Apparently, so now some people say, is this actually all happening in the same world? Is Vegas Vacation and the Oceans, are they all of the same universe?
There's an Ocean's Lampoon's cinematic universe, Andy.
Oh, apparently so.
Oh, I don't care for it. We also have a throwback to an audio cue that was kind of fun.
Yeah, when Andy Garcia realizes the police that he was watching, he gets on the walkie-talkie and one of the guards says, "What happened to all that money?" That line was actually heard from the original version.
Oh,
nice little audio pull.
There we go. A little Easter egg.
And just one kind of awful tidbit that's I guess worth noting: the moment when you see Andy Garcia and Julia Roberts kind of blowing up that hotel. Originally, the hotel that they're blowing up is the New York hotel on the Vegas Strip. Well, this actually happened. It was filmed before September 11th, and it was released after September 11th. And of course, after that horror, they realized they really can't show any sort of demolition of anything New York related, and so they replaced it with kind of a CG hotel, which is much better that way. You don't have to tie in anything heavy.
Yeah. And the comedy is good, watching Basher watch the thing while the hotel is being blown up behind him. I don't know if that was in the original. It feels like a weird, that would be a strange
It was apparently
connection.
They said they replaced that behind him too.
Wow. Well, anyhow, we've obviously got a couple of sequels coming, but that's not the only thing that has been done with this property.
Right. The Takarazuka Review in Japan actually adapted this movie as a musical in 2011, 2012. It was performed by Star Troupe, and I don't know how well it succeeded, but it makes me very curious to see how the Ocean's 11 musical in Japanese performed. I almost want to watch that. I think it'd be really interesting.
And so was this other one? We've got a Bollywood film, Happy New Year in 2014. Have you seen this? Do you know if it is a remake?
No, I haven't heard of it at all, which is, I find that funny that there's this, what was the other, we talked about another film recently where there's a Bollywood version of it. And there was a lot of argument whether it was really just a complete ripoff or not.
Yeah,
Gosh, I can't remember what it
probably
was.
Also was starring Shah Rukh Khan, I think, because he's in everything.
Right.
So I don't remember. I don't recall.
I don't know, but yeah, Happy New Year is apparently another version of this. So there you go.
How did it do in awards season?
It was a fun movie. It wasn't really designed for awards, but it still ended up with 4 wins and 20 other nominations. At the ALMA Awards, which is the American Latino Media Arts Awards, Andy Garcia ended up winning Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Motion Picture, which is fantastic. I was looking for some interesting awards here. In Germany, they have the Gold Bogey Award, and I guess this award is based on the number of people seeing a film within a certain time frame. The Gold Award is for 3 million people seeing the film in a 30-day time span, which is obviously, speaks to its popularity. But I was just looking at these other Bogey Awards. Apparently, the top Bogey Award is the Platinum, and that is for any film that is viewed by at least 10 million people. So it's
30
funny.
days.
Yeah, they don't say that with the Titanium. The Platinum, it goes from the Bogey Award, which is 1 million people or 1,000 people per copy with a minimum of 25 copies within first 10 days. The Bronze Award is 1 million people within 10 days. The Silver Award, 2 million people within 20 days. The Gold, 3 million people in 30 days. Platinum, 5 million people within the first 50 days of release. And then the Titanium just says viewed by 10 million people.
That requires too much math.
It's such a strange award. This was an interesting one that I think was, to me, it spoke a lot of films coming out this year. The CSA, the Casting Society of America, the Artios Awards. It was nominated for Best Casting for a Feature Film Comedy. Deborah Zane was nominated. It's a brilliant bunch of casting, especially with all the turnover they had with roles. However, she ended up losing to Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. And when you think about it, that film really set an incredible trajectory for the 8 films in that franchise, not counting the Fantastic Beasts films. So I can almost say I agree with it, even though I think they put together a strong team here.
Let's look at the numbers, Andy.
So Soderbergh's remake cost a cool $85 million to make, which is about half of what the boys stole from Benedict, and about $115.6 million in today's dollars. The movie was a smash when it opened on December 7th, 2001, pretty much by itself, grossing $183.4 million in the US and $267.3 million internationally, giving it a grand total of almost $613 million in today's dollars. It was the 5th highest grossing film of 2001, behind Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, Monsters, Inc., and Shrek, and just ahead of Pearl Harbor, of all things. That leaves it with an adjusted profit per finished minute of $4.3 million. Certainly a figure Danny Ocean would be happy with.
That's fantastic. I love the movie. I'm glad it was successful. I'm glad we have 2 more to talk about, even though they're on a little bit more shaky ground. 3 more. That's right. Huzzah. 3 more to talk about. And I think we can make quick work of ranking it.
Let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel. You can see all the movies we talked about on this very show. Or you can swipe over in your show notes and you'll see the word Flickchart. You just tap that and it will take you right to this movie in Flickchart where you can add it to your own list. And let's see where it stacks up. Where do we start?
First up, Ocean's 11 or The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Both remakes. Oh, actually, no. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I'm sorry. It's the Noomi version. It's the original.
Aha. Ocean's 11.
I feel like I would go with Dragon Tattoo, but I'm going to say Ocean's 11 to keep it in the top half.
All right, there you go.
Ocean's 11 or Time Crimes?
Ocean's 11. All right, let's do it.
Let's do it. 1, 2, 3.
Paper.
Rock. There you go.
As it should be.
I don't mind that. Ocean's 11 or Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan? Star Trek II for me.
I will give you... I'll give you Star Trek 2.
You're a giver.
Yeah, I'm a giver.
Ocean's 11 or The World's End?
That's gonna be
World's End for me.
Jiminy, yeah, World's End.
Ocean's 11 or The Philadelphia Story? Philadelphia Story for me.
Ocean's 11.
All right, let's do it.
Let's do it again.
1,
2,
2, 3.
Scissors. Rock. 2 for 2, baby.
Ocean's 11 or No Country for Old Men? Oh, definitely No Country for me.
Okay, No Country for me.
Ocean's 11 or All About Eve? All About Eve for me.
Ocean's 11.
Let's do it.
All right.
1, 2, 3.
Paper.
Rock.
I'm on a roll.
Ocean's 11. Oh, here's some Brad Pitt battle. Ocean's 11 or Moneyball?
Moneyball.
Moneyball for me.
Don't even need to think about it.
Well, that lands Ocean's 11 at 74 on our chart. Pretty high. Higher than I would put it. But, it's a fun film, so it's okay.
All right. So where is it on your chart?
My personal chart, it landed at 1030 out of 3986, which is about a 74%.
Oh, man. Oh, Andy. Oh, sweet, sweet Andy. Mine is number 32 on my Flick chart out of 1,025, and that puts it at 97. Going by the algorithm, this should be a 5-star and a heart, and I'm going to stick with that on letterboxd.com/thenextreel. What do you think?
Okay.
Yeah.
Mine would be the 3.5 stars, and that is where it is. So
3.5? Are you nuts? Yeah. Are you nuts?
I have a fun time with it, but I've always struggled a little bit with the way the story unfolds, and so
3.5
I know.
struggle. We just had a great conversation about this movie that we have arguably no problems with, and it's 3.5.
It's because it kind of unfolds rather slowly, and it's here's
slowly.
the thing.
Did you see 1960s?
No, I did, and I remember very specifically what you said at the beginning of this, that you take it very personally, and I'm certainly experiencing that right now. But it's trust me, the film actually went up on ranking for me. It was probably a 3-star before, and this time when I found so much more of a connection with the Tess character, I ended up giving it an extra half star. So it has improved. It might improve on future viewings, but right now, that's where it sits.
Glory be, how gracious you are with your half stars, Andy. You just litter them around the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Oh, glory be.
Well, in our world of finite numbers of stars, I had to steal it from something. So,
well, that's delightful, Andy. I'm very excited that we're in this series, even though you are wrong. Well, let's talk about where we go from here. Dangerous waters ahead.
Yeah, we're talking about Ocean's 12, the next film in the franchise, which came out just a few years later. I believe it was 2004. And it'll be an interesting one to look at. This is the gang getting together for some European heist action. So oft maligned middle film.
That's the one I'm most curious about. I remember it poorly, and I don't remember it as a poor film. I just remember it poorly, but I am told it's a poor film, so I want to see if those things line up.
Well, I'll tell you, Pete, of the 3 films, this is the one that I have always said is my favorite.
Oh,
So
for crying out loud.
I'm looking forward to talking about it with you next week.
This may be our most contentious series ever.
Well, everybody, if you want to hear more of us, but you can't wait until next week's show, you can support us over on patreon.com/thenextreel and get access to our exclusive members-only weekend show, The Saturday Matinee. We talk about movie news and new trailers, plus we go head-to-head in our weekly challenge in which we put together lists of movies related in some way to the movie we're discussing that week. There are all sorts of other goodies, too, if you support us at different levels. Just head on over to patreon.com/thenextreel.
And you know the drill, everybody. You can head over to thenextreel.com, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app, and follow us on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook at The Next Reel. The Next Reel couldn't happen without the hard work of Steven Smart, who runs the Instagram program, Ben Lott, who runs all things Twitter and the Blot Spot, and very special thanks to Eli Catlin, who graciously allows us to use his song Ragtime Instrumental as the theme of this show. You can find out more about Eli on his SoundCloud page.
When the movie ends,
our conversation begins. Amazon giveth, Andy.
as Amazon always doeth.
Now, because you're so divisive, you've gone for a 5-star, and I have gone with a 1-star.
That's right.
Where would you like to begin?
Let's end high.
Okay. All right. Well, then I will begin with the good and kindly Eden, who was not a fan of this movie and writes, no. I tried to watch this movie, but after the first seconds of hearing Clooney's voice, I got sleepy. My eyes blurred at the screen, and everything got dark. Oops. Sorry. I'm having a flashback to the moment I forgot how to type. I didn't see this movie and don't know if I ever will, so don't bother with my opinion. It's just one out of many. Thanks, Eden. Critical analysis.
Wow. So did she see it or not?
I don't know. She said maybe the first few seconds.
It's almost like a dream.
I don't think Clooney got out of prison.
Oh, man.
It's a very different movie.
Well, I have a 5-star that you will appreciate. It's by Patrick A. Huber, who says, really good movie. A new Mission Impossible?
Oh, Jesus.
This was a really good movie, in my opinion. I rented it. I thought that it was just a good movie until the ending really caught me. And then I was like, dang, it really makes you think.
I don't get the Mission Impossible bit. I'm not gonna lie to you. I don't get it.
It makes you think, Pete.
I love his enthusiasm.
It's like Mission Impossible. Like, dang!
Dang. Oh, thanks, Amazon.
It's hard to believe that we've been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
You're telling me producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our originals page when shopping for books and movies we've covered.
Just visit thenextreel.com/originals. Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great conversations.
I was so excited for our big Star Trek film franchise series this season. All those movies adapted from Gene Roddenberry's original 1960s TV show.
As a huge fan, I know that you geeked out over analyzing the adaptations.
Absolutely. From the motion picture to the Kelvin timeline films, seeing the Enterprise crews on the big screen was a dream come true.
Our list of source material isn't just all books and plays. We have the original series in our list of source material. You can rent the episodes to watch and enjoy and support the show in the process.
For our Millennium Trilogy series, we covered films adapted from the original books that launched Lisbeth Salander, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, The Girl Who Played with Fire, and The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest.
As much as I love Fincher's version, the original Swedish versions are the way to go. We also did our Die Hard series in season 7.
I can't believe Die Hard and Die Hard 2 were adaptations. Two of the greatest action movies ever.
Well, one of them at least. The other is awfully fun, though. We revisited the classic Mary Poppins for our 1960s movie musical series. A spoonful of sugar always helps the medicine go down.
Old Boy was intense for our Park Chan-wook Vengeance trilogy, and East of Eden and Giant were highlights of our James Dean series.
And a fun time travel mind bender with Predestination to cap things off.
Find all the books behind these adaptations and more at thenextreel.com/originals.
Dive into the source material for your favorite movies. Check it out today, thenextreel.com/originals.